when I came to, I was suddenly in that strange tea room where I'd often argued furiously with Beato from across that table. Of course, Beato was nowhere to be found. It was just me, isolated and alone. That's okay. Even so, I won't stop thinking. Okay then, what were Nox's commandments again? I'm sure Lano explained most of them when slamming me with them. Of course, even I recall them vaguely. What was the first one again?
謹んで申し上げる。ノックス第一条。犯人は物語当初の登場人物以外を禁ず。
When I muttered about what the first one was, as if answering my question, Lano's subordinate appeared. Without bothering with an unnecessary hello, she told me nothing more or less than what I wanted to know.
そうだったな。第一条。犯人は物語の最初から登場している人物でなければならない。
In other words, the culprit must have already appeared. As early as the first game? True, that's the most basic of basics in the mystery genre. A classic assumption. A classic assumption? Have I really been keeping to that assumption? With each new game, the number of people in this tale keeps increasing. That violates the closed circle rule. By that point, everything gets screwed up. Did I give up on the inside, thinking that the true culprit or mastermind must not have shown up yet, and that reasoning was therefore useless? If I read this tale as a fantasy, new characters keep showing up. To the point where even having demon kings or gods or creators appear wouldn't be strange at all. Even if the true mastermind first appears in one of the last episodes, I'd have to accept it. However, if I read it as a mystery and stick with that conviction, there's no need to worry at all about anyone who shows up later, because Nox's first clearly states that it's impossible for the culprit to be anyone who appears later on in the story. Of course, there's also what both Lano and Virgilia said. There's no guarantee that this tale follows the rules of the Decalogue, so of course I can't deny the possibility that the culprit first appeared in the second game or later. However, this is one way of thinking. This time, I'll forget about the Devil's Proof completely, and try to borrow the power of the Decalogue in my thinking. After all, I've already said myself that I won't be able to reach the truth without a multi-angled outlook.
なら、何度も繰り返されたこのゲームの犯人は全て18人の中の誰かだってことになる。19人目の幻想なんて初めから必要ない。
Even the first of Nox's commandments denies the existence of an unknown person known as the witch from the very start. If I had followed that in the truest sense, I might not have suffered so miserably in the second game.
Nox の第2条は
謹んで申し上げたてまつる。ノックス第2条探偵方法に超自然能力の使用を禁ず。
Lano's other subordinate appeared without a sound, gave me an answer to my question. That's right, a detective can't go around using magic.
そして、これがフェアな戦いであるならば、探偵と同様に、犯人もまた魔法を使ってはならないということだよな。
謹んで申し上げる。解釈は自由と知りたまえ。
だよな。ああ、俺の自由に解釈させてもらうぜ。
If this game is a battle between me and Beato, then because this tale is solvable, no elements will appear that make it impossible to solve. In other words, things like magic mustn't appear. When they do appear, I shouldn't suspect that the mystery element is breaking down, but I should instead question why it was shown and suspect the witnesses and observers. Also called an unreliable narrator. That's right! That was Beato's greatest weapon in the second game. Depictions of magic which couldn't exist in a mystery. By showing me that, she forced me to think that this tale wasn't a mystery, and therefore that reasoning was impossible. So I surrendered. However, if I had believed unshakably that it was a mystery, it would have been completely obvious to doubt the witnesses who claimed to have seen magic. Also, at the end of the first game, it was revealed that this tale was passed on to people in the future by that message bottle. Someone had written about this crime, this tale. In other words, this entire tale is a world that includes the personal opinions of an observer, namely the person who wrote that message in a bottle. In other words, the observer isn't God. It's a human. Therefore, there's no guarantee that this description is truly impartial. By the end of the first game, it was already clear that we've broken the constant premise of the mystery genre, that the story itself must be seen through the eyes of God. For that reason, it's possible to doubt even the observer as well as the witnesses. If I could have doubted this much, no matter how many seemingly unsolvable displays of magic appeared, I wouldn't have had to blindly accept them and give up. However, that begs the question, is it even possible to solve a tale written by an observer who isn't impartial? If I get obsessed with this, all my reasoning will end here. However, I had to believe that Beate was trying to fight me through this tale, because it's a fight. It means I've been given a chance of winning. By giving me that, doesn't that mean that reasoning is possible? This part is tough. Unless I believe that the cruel witch took on the risk of losing to try and have a fair fight with me, I can't get past this part. Just like Virgilia said, it's just like love. If I can't believe that Beate is fighting me head-on with everything she's got, I won't be able to reason any further than this. Sure, I'll acknowledge it. Unless we acknowledge that we love each other, we won't be able to get any further. When Virgilia ran out of patience with the two of us, shy and incapable as we were of acknowledging that out loud, she gave me that red truth instead. That was the red truth saying, Beate wanted me to solve it, so she made the riddles of this game solvable. What the hell? It's like Sato-san in Class A says he likes you. Like hearing a love confession via a friend. I really am pitiful. Reasoning is love. If we don't love each other, the reasoning won't start. In that case, how can we say that we love each other? If you think you can solve it, just you try. You're incompetent like hell, you can solve it. Yeah, according to George Aniki, people like that are called tsundora. That brutal witch is finally starting to look a bit cute. If I meet her again, I want to try saying you're such a tsundora. If I meet her again, somewhere.
他の実会も教えてくれ。純不動でいいぜ。使えそうなやつを頼む。
謹んで申し上げる。ノックス第8条。提示されない手がかりでの解決を禁ず。
謹んで申し上げる。ノックス第6条。探偵方法に偶然と第6巻の使用を禁ず。
Must not be solved with clues that aren't presented, and it must not be solved by relying on accident or coincidence. If this tale is made to be solvable, we can read this the opposite way. In other words, clues must be prepared so that the case can be solved, and it has to be made in a way that it can be solved without relying on coincidence. If I can believe that Beate is challenging me to a fair game where reasoning is possible, then I can be sure of that. In other words, Beate has already left me clues, hints and messages in this tale. It isn't from the Decalogue, but Erika or someone said this. There are 3 riddles to be exposed in mystery. One is the whodunit. Who is the culprit? One is the howdunit. How did they commit the crime? And one is the whydunit. Why did they commit the crime? All of this means that clues related to these 3 riddles are already present inside this tale. No, strictly speaking, it's like this. Because she wanted me to solve these 3 riddles, Beate scattered hints about. Though whether I'm capable of catching those or not is another matter. Even if you think a riddle you propose is easy, it might be difficult for the person trying to solve it. In that case, it's only natural that there will be a difference in how difficult each person finds it. Therefore, as Beate goes through each successive game, she watches me closely, and tweaks the game as needed to get a good arrangement. When Beate realized that I'd completely surrendered in the second game because it was too hard, she's secretly worried. If I surrendered and lost the will to fight, the game would no longer remain on an even footing. Therefore, in order to make me regain my will to fight, from the 3rd game onwards she set things up in a way that made it easier for me, giving me tips on how to fight and a few hints. Virgilia and Renova obviously appeared so that they could help me. Also, though we still had the usual crazy magic shows, she gave me the metaphor of the brown tube trial, as well as tips on how to fight back. I finally understood how to fight, and most likely, at the end of the 4th game, Beatrice managed to have the all-out showdown with me that she had probably wanted. Then, Beatrice acknowledged that my abilities had become full-fledged, and entrusted me with her heart. Entrusted me with explaining this tale, didn't she? In that case, it was really dumb of me to boycott most of the 5th game, just because I was so disgusted with those 2 witches. It doesn't matter who the game master is. All I need to search for is the truth in Beatrice's game. On the contrary, I should probably thank those 2 witches just a little for continuing the game in Beatrice's place, now that she's gone and left everything to me. Of course I doubt those evil witches were trying to do anything of the sort. Culprit. Crime. Motive. The answers to those 3 ultimate riddles, the hints, must be scattered throughout the previous shown tales. It's probably a very faint light, like trying to find beads that have fallen onto a sandy beach. They're definitely there. However, they're so faint that unless I believe strongly, there's no way I'll be able to find them.
金家、慎んで申し上げる。
なんだ。
物語を遡りたまえ。
Yes, hype is about to start. You can tell by the music.
今の汝には、真実のか弱き光を見逃さぬ目が与えられているとし。
今こそ物語を。
推理可能とは、信頼関係の先にあるものと知りたてまつれ。
ああ、知ってるぜ。いや、今ようやく気づいたかもしれない。
It's something that's been repeated over and over again throughout the tale, persistently so.
愛がなければ、真実は見えない。
That's right. Slowly, the tea room dissolved into darkness. Then, as though I was slowly sinking into a pitch-black sea, I passed through the crevice of the long journey I'd taken with Beatrice, and kept on falling and falling. It was a bizarre experience, like crossing over the boundary of sleep while still conscious. The several tales before became faint bubbles. No, were they small shining fragments? And were scattered like stars amidst the pitch-black sky. I kept sinking on and on into that sea. The tales up until now, one after another, Virgilius guided Dante to Mount Purgatory, and brought him to the feet of the Eternal Lady who waited at the top, Beatrice. Therefore, the innermost depths lay not at the bottom, but at the peak of Mount Purgatory. The Eternal Lady had been waiting there for Dante the whole time. And then I know. I finally reached the truth. To the depths, no. To the peak of Mount Purgatory. Idiot. You really are an idiot. He woke from the sleep of death, and bit by bit his sense of pain came back to him. On Battler's face, which still looked up at the heavens as he hung there pierced by the longsword, a suffering and alive expression gradually returned.
お前は本当にバカだ。大バカだ。
Battler noticed. This whole time, Beate had been snuggling up against him, sleeping, and when he held her, he knew that it was not Beate, but her crumbling remains. So when Battler just tried to hold that form as fragile as ash, then, just like a sand castle made on a beach, washed away by a small wave, it fell apart and lost its form. At Battler's feet lay nothing but the ragged remnants of Beate's dress and a pile of ash. Now, on top of that pile of ash, he could see something sparkling gold. It was the husk of a single gold butterfly, which had been torn to bits. And so, Battler knew I've definitely reached the truth. However, I wasn't able to do it, while Beate still remained in this world.
ベアト、お前本当にバカだろ。俺はようやくお前の出題したこのふざけた謎の真相にたどり着いたんだぞ。お前のお望み通りにくじけずにとうとう最後までたどり着いたのに、なのにそれを待てずにくじけちまったんだよ。お前はあんなにも信じてたんだろう。俺が絶対に真実に至ってくれるって。ならどうしてそれを俺と一緒に信じて待てなかったんだよ。永遠の拷問を強いていたのはお前じゃない、俺だ。俺がお前に過酷な拷問を強いた。そしてお前は最後まで抗い俺に訴え続け、そして俺はようやく今になってたどり着いたってのに、お前はもう待ってなくて手遅れになっちまったって。バカ野郎。どうしてお前が先にくじけちまうんだよ。
It's my fault. I forced her to endure this torture. In fact, she's been doing a wonderful job sticking through it for so long. Over and over and over again, you kept on protesting to me. And because I was so incompetent, it was as though I couldn't understand the truth.
バカ野郎。バカ野郎。お前の謎はさ、ひねりすぎなんだよ。どうしてもっと簡単に言えねえんだよ。バカ野郎。
A scream of pain filled the sad cathedral. The sad witch who wasn't able to communicate the truth to Battler. The sad man who wasn't able to understand the witch's truth. Battler's howl of anger and sadness rang out for that pair. The clock hung in the cathedral showed that it was midnight on October 5th, 1986. Time was up. For everything. You're kidding me. Don't set something like a time limit on this difficult riddle you're so proud of.
いや。わかるぜ。それほどのわずかな奇跡の中に。お前は祈ったんだよな。お前もじいさまと同じだったんだ。
You prayed for and bet on the power of a miracle. One so unlikely that it was totally impossible, less likely than finding a bead you've dropped on a sandy beach. And that means I've now truly arrived at that miracle. However, your time didn't last long enough. If I had reached this point even a little sooner, if I could have seen the truth, even if it had been right before the time was up, I might have been able to save you. But right now, I've been run through pathetically. I can't even hold what remains of you. As I've attempted to pull the longsword out, I tried stretching out my arms and kicking my feet, struggling to at least touch her remains. Nothing worked. At that time, I noticed a golden glint on the palm of my hand. It was a single wing from a gold butterfly. That small fragment of gold was the only piece of Beatrice that I was permitted to touch. I cried with all my strength, gripped that fragment and pressed it against my head, apologizing. Why couldn't I reach the truth earlier? Then I pressed it to my chest, promising that even now, I would never again lose the truth. When I pressed my hand against my chest, the sword piercing my chest cut through my wrist, and blood dribbled out. That blood spread throughout my fist, and it must have soaked that gold fragment with my red blood. It must have been the only way of telling her that I had found the truth she'd wanted me to know about. I clutched the wing of the gold butterfly with my freshly bleeding hand and pressed it against the red sword that pierced me. At this point, Ishiromia Battler knows, and he understands. He's found. This tells everything. At that time, it seemed as though a faint golden light leaked out of the gaps in his clenched fists. The two witches had their backs turned, and Erika was laughing at Battler's corpse.
本当に無様ですね、バトラさん。あなたの愚かさを石像にして永遠に。
At that time, Battler's chest, no, the red longsword that pierced Battler, began to sparkle gold from deep within his chest. That bright golden light began to change the red sword's color, turning it gold.
何事？バトラが。これは。何？
Battler coughed up blood and groaned. His consciousness came back. His will to live, his will to fight, came back. The red longsword that pierced Battler could no longer be described as such. By now it had become a golden longsword. Then, slowly, gradually, it pulled itself out of Battler's chest. It finally pulled itself free and started dancing through the air, then stood up in front of Battler's eyes as though it knew who its master was. Battler, crawling on the floor and moaning, grabbed the golden longsword, and though it looked painful, he slowly rose to his feet once again.
込んだ演出ね。これラムダの隠し玉。その輝きってまさか。悪いわね。最新は却下よ。
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Lambda was in awe, and then Bernkastel frowned. You could read it yourself.
シエスタ姉妹、その復活幻想を削除しなさい。了解であります。45、410、発砲許可。それが IFF エラーコード999。ヒュー。39だと。バカな。
The Chiesta sisters hesitated, unable to carry out Bernkastel's orders.
ラムダ、これはどういう茶番よ。完全に魔女幻想は打ち破られて、法廷は私の勝利に終わったはずよ。
悪いわね、ベル。もう少し付き合ってもらうわ。そうでしょ、後ろ宮バトラ。
ああ、任せたな。エリカ、ベルンカステル。今度は俺の真実の番だぜ。
再審請求を受理するわ。魔女集会の幻想法廷の閉廷は撤回される。
異議提出。すでに裁判は結審し、判決は公示されている。
異議却下。いかなる判決も新たな真実の前にはかすむ。
異議提出。バトラはプレイヤーを追放されただけでなく、魔女の地位を持たない、上告する資格を持たない。
異議却下。もうね、あるのよ彼には。絶対の魔女ラムダデルタの名において認めるわ。後ろ宮バトラ、あなたを新たな黄金の魔女、いえ無限の魔術師後ろ宮バトラと認めるわ。
なんですって。バトラが魔女の位を。
The rank of a witch, which he had desired for so long, had been granted to Battler so quickly. And on top of that, this wasn't anything temporary. This was an official, proper authorization by Lambda Delta. Erica couldn't accept it and her face turned bright red.
最後の最後まで楽しませてくれるわ。あの子にいいわ。付き合ってあげる。エリカ、受けて立ちなさい。あなたが私と築き上げた赤き真実は完璧よ。夏日が犯人であるとする真実の構築は完璧だわ。絶対にバトラには崩せない。無論です、我が主。何の心配もありません。それよりシエスタ姉妹、我が主は射殺を命じていますよ。いつになったら命令は実行されるんですか。
エラーコード39。領主照準には解除コードが必要です。だからあいつはやると言ったに。
領主？誰が？このかけらの支配者は誰？私です。領主、まさかバトラが。はい、後ろ宮バトラはこのかけらの正当な領主と認定されているであります。
ええ、そうよ。まだわからないの？あの黄金の輝きの意味が。バトラはね、至ったのよ。全ての真実の最新王にね。
He's gone full Ultra Instinct now.
だからバトラは今やこの世界の物語のゲームの全てを理解している。それはつまり ゲームの支配者の地位を得たということよ。それを信じたくないでしょベル。
信じたくもない。いいわ、バトラが本当に全てを理解したのか試してあげるわ。エリカ。
残念ねエリカ、せっかくこのかけらの領主に任命されたところだけれど、それを剥奪するわ。このかけらの新しい領主は後ろ宮バトラよ。悔しいねえねえ、悔しい。せっかく領主になれたのにいきなり剥奪ってどんな気持ち？どんな気持ち？
私の推理を否定できるものなら知ってみればいいでしょ。そんなことふか私の構築した推理に隙は夏日が犯人であることは否定不能。
俺は夏日おばさん以外が犯人である推理を構築できる。確かにお前の真実は否定不能かもしれない。ならば同時にお前の真実は俺の新しい真実も否定できない。
Spettler spoke with the red truth allowed him by his status as a sorcerer.
夏日以外が犯人で？どうやってドラノール、バトラさんの妄言に付き合ってあげてください。
Slowly, Lana stepped forwards. In her hand was the red longsword of the Decalogue. She also had a blue shortsword. In Battler's hand was a golden longsword. The two rivals once again. No, for the first time. They truly confronted each other.